Hello and welcome to this round 4 of Grand Prix Copenhagen. Marcus Evald against Niklas Holtmann kicking things off. Jun Death Shadow against a list that's a little bit different. Fate Foretold. This is a very, very powerful enchantment that feels tailor-made for Modern because it means that each turn you put a counter onto it, and then each turn you get to play a spell with a cost up to the number of counters on it for free. And with the likes of Ancestral Vision and so on, that can get very out of hand. But Death Shadow will give it a stern test because with both discard and a fast clock, Niklas Holtmann might be able to get in underneath Marcus Evald, who is 3-0 in spite of not having had a full 3 buys here.
I'll be rooting here for the guys keeping it fair.
Which of these decks is the fair deck?
Playing 13/13 creatures for 1 mana. No, I think Fate Foretold has something to prove, you know? Marcus is approaching it with a very interesting twist because he's basically trying to maximize on the Fate Foretold value by generating as many turns as possible for him.
Yeah.
So we see some cards that rarely see Modern play.
Yeah, taking extra turns is something that I've seen a little bit in a couple of different decks, and it's definitely one that is powerful if you can get past these early turns of the game. The early turns before you really have the option to cast your big time walks, your temporal masteries, etc., can be problematic. There's exhaustion early on to potentially keep creatures tapped down, but what Marcus, I would guess, is hoping for is to navigate these early turns without too much trouble. We see 3 copies of Exhaustion, a Fate, an As Foretold there, and a Cryptic Command. Cryptic Command often feels like a time walk if you're tapping down creatures in these sorts of aggressive matches.
No, Exhaustion basically lets Niklas would let Niklas skip his untap step. Yeah, how do you deal with in this deck with your Fate Foretold being discarded, being abrupt decayed? I don't know if your deck is still functional afterwards. We also see zero Ancestral Visions right now.
I mean, Ancestral Visions was already a big part of the Taking Turns deck anyway because you had the time for it to unsuspend more quickly. This was a deck that existed and was pretty reasonable, but I'd say struggled to be considered really tier 1 prior to As Foretold. Having As Foretold in, though, is taking up slots, and when you first cast it, it doesn't do anything until you first get a spell off with it. So when you have As Foretold with Ancestral Vision, it's great. When you have it without, it might take a bit of time. We will find out soon enough whether or not it's going to be good enough here.
And taking As Foretold there with the thoughts, it was not really a difficult decision. Miracle.
So effectively ramping himself up there more than anything else here.
That's crazy.
Immediately gets the extra turn. Gets to get an extra land in play, suspend the Ancestral Vision. We know that there's going to be a chain of exhaustions, meaning that Niklas Holtmann is not going to have a lot of mana to work with beyond whatever lands he plays in each individual turn. And if you're Holtmann, he doesn't have that many lands in his deck. He's not got access to green mana to be able to get things going with Traverse the Elvenwald right now. Another Temporal Mastery. That Ancestral Vision ticking down.
No way.
I mean, if you have to draw up how to win with this deck, having running Temporal Masteries on the top of your deck is definitely a nice place to be. That Ancestral Vision, functionally in sort of real game turns, has not been suspended for as many turns as one would normally expect.
This is insane.
And once this deck gets up to 5-6 mana and can start actually just casting spells to take extra turns, if it's got those Ancestral Visions to keep it in gas, it gets very, very difficult to keep up with.
And then you just play it Planeswalker or something, and basically the game is yours.
Yeah, in terms of how these decks actually win the game, it can vary a little bit. Let's take a little look at what's going on with this list. I believe that this one is working with Planeswalkers. Chandra, Torch of Defiance, a pretty straightforward way of winning the game if you have lots of turns to get her up to ultimate level.
You know what would be funny if the Mishra's Bauble revealed the 4th Temporal Mastery on Marcus' deck?
That'd be pretty funny.
Not for Niklas, but...
I mean, I think that's the thing with these two decks squaring off. Someone's going to be having a great time, and I'm not sure that it's ever going to be both of them.
And Niklas really also punished here for not drawing land, so he couldn't even use the turns he had to extend his board.
So Cryptic Command here, bouncing Tarmogoyf, drawing a card for Marcus. And the first Ancestral Vision resolves. I mean, one interesting thing that happens once you've got As Foretold in your deck is that there's a temptation if you draw an Ancestral Vision in the mid-game to keep it in your hand rather than suspending it, because it might be more efficient to find an As Foretold to be able to cast it for free.
But Marcus might have found a way to build this deck so that he gets, you know, the best of both worlds. He somehow has... he has, I don't want to say a late game plan, but taking these extra turns is good with everything he's trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm liking a lot of what's going on here. As Foretold now in play, currently with 0 counters on it, but soon enough it will be ticking up, and it will be ticking up faster than it would do in most decks because of the fact that he's taking these extra turns.
There's this time walk effect where you skip your untap step.
Savor the moment.
I've always wanted to make that work.
Maybe this is the place.
But it's not in the deck, is it?
I don't believe it's in this one. There are some nice ones. I don't want to spoil too much of it in case we get a chance to see them, because As Foretold has definitely adjusted the deck construction of this deck just a little bit. Nicholas Holtman here. This is not going to be a matchup that I'm guessing that he's practiced for. He's kind of having to...
You don't think?
Well, I mean, the red-blue taking turns deck has been around for a little bit of time, so it's really just making spot adjustments for how As Foretold changes it.
4/4 Death Shadow. I think Holtman had the decision to make rather to Abrupt Decay Fate Foretold here, or maybe try to set up lethal next turn, which is probably a good idea. Wait, doesn't Chandra also deal 4 damage?
Chandra can deal 4 damage.
Then Nicholas better has Street Wraith or something. Now that would be too easy for Marcus. Marcus doesn't even need that. It's just time walking.
Yeah, having to pay full retail for that copy of Temporal Mastery.
Which is not a problem if you have a Planeswalker and As Foretold.
Now there we saw him paying mana for Serum Visions, hoping to find another card to cast, and he finds a Wheel of Fate. Being able to cast Wheel of Fate for free, pretty exciting, because it's just straight up Wheel of Fortune. Each player's discarding their hand, drawing 7 cards.
This is just complete madness.
Yeah, this is what happens when As Foretold is in play. It feels like you're playing a fundamentally different game to your opponent.
Maybe he broke it. Maybe he found the combination of cards that make As Foretold playable in Modern, because it's not, you cannot just put Ancestral Vision and As Foretold into your deck and assume it's going to be a good deck. But here, you use the As Foretold not once per turn, but basically by getting these extra turns, you really chain all this value together. I think this is probably it's like a pseudo infinite already.
So getting to cast Ancestral Vision for free there, cast another As Foretold. It is useful having multiples in play because you can only kind of use each one once per turn. There is a Time Walk, so he's going to Time Warp. Sorry, to take an extra turn there. Sleight of Hand means that he's going to keep the action going. I believe that he has another copy of Wheel of Fate in hand as well, and this deck is also running a couple of copies of Days Undoing, so he's not really going to run out of gas anytime soon. He's running 6 draw 7s in his deck, in addition to his 4 draw 3s.
Well, and this is the genius part. He needs exactly that to make things work.
And there is a Chandra emblem. From now on, every time he casts a spell, he's going to be able to nug Nicholas Holtman for some damage, and he's not going to need to cast very many spells to kill Holtman, because with Death Shadow, you can't afford to be too picky about your life total. And there's a Wheel of Fate to close things out. So that game, admittedly, Marcus Evald did have running copies of Temporal Mastery on top of his deck, so functionally it was as if he started the game on about turn 4 compared to Holtman's at turn 1. But that was very exciting. I can't wait to see more of it. We're going to get a chance to see more of it right after these messages.
Hallelujah.
Hello and welcome back to round 4 of Grand Prix Copenhagen. If you've just tuned in, you might want to skip back and see the last game because Marcus Evald's Fate Foretold deck picked up an impressive Game 1 win against Niklas Holtmann. Holtmann, big smile on his face. He was not expecting that. I think in total, in Game 1, Marcus Evald took about 7 extra turns. He also got to cast 2 free draw 7s and at least 1 free draw 3. So basically, once he's got As Foretold in play, he's playing Vintage and everyone else is playing Modern.
Marcus's deck performed near perfectly. Niklas's deck performed quite weakly. There was just not enough pressure for Niklas, and Niklas needs a better hands. Just disrupt, pressure, maybe double strike for the win, or just double striking is actually not that crucial. I would prefer to just see solid cards, Thought Seizes, Abrupt Decays. Maybe Liliana could still be good enough. Maybe not. Could be too slow, and then just finish the game.
We're referring to this deck as Fate Foretold, by the way, because in addition to As Foretold, this deck is running a full 4 copies of Wheel of Fate. Wheel of Fate, the suspend version of Wheel of Fortune, and in this deck, suspend not something you really need to worry about too much because once that As Foretold is in play, you get to simply cast it for free.
I like it much better than the versions trying to abuse Restore Balance, because Restore Balance is really difficult to make work. There's also actually an anti-synergy of drawing 3 cards, trying to draw 3 cards with Ancestral Visions, and then balancing them away again against maybe an aggro opponent that doesn't have any cards in hand. So this looks to me like a much more streamlined game plan. I don't know if it's good enough. This is only round 4. How many buys did Marcus have?
Definitely not a full 3. We'll try and find that out for you, but it's a deck that it merges together some of what I liked I liked the extra turns deck before the addition of all of these cool
when it
cards.
was still playing a lot of bad cards, you mean?
When it was playing different cards. In terms of the differences, one of the cards that used to be in the extra turns deck that hasn't found space in this version is Snapcaster Mage. Previously, you would have Snapcaster Mage in order to pretty much do whatever you need, get back whatever time walks you need, and actually often win the game by attacking over a course of lots of turns. Clearly, this is, when you're winning, a much cleaner win condition. You've got your 2 copies of Chandra Torture Defiance, who both accelerate you to time walks and have a very good shot at going ultimate.
Tim, I'm going to go on a limb here, and I'm going to say the blue-red taking turns deck probably got the highest relative improvement.
Yeah, I think that the delta on this one is very big. I think I'm intrigued to see more of the Elves deck running Vizier of Remedies.
But Elves was a playable deck before, that's what I mean.
Alrighty, well, things kicking off here for Holtmann here. Bloodstain Mire, meaning that he's going to get to fetch, I'm guessing, probably a land that can tap for black because there is a Thoughtseize in hand for him. And Holtmann, I guess, doesn't need to worry too much about his life total in this match. He can afford to go pretty low just so that he gets his Death Shadows up and active early on. Yeah,
the thing is when Chandra's Emblem starts burning you out, it doesn't really matter if you're on 7 or 20. Because then Marcus's deck has done what it's trying to do.
Yeah, at that point he's got lots of lands in play. He's probably drawing plenty of extra cards. So Thoughtseize sees Thing in the Ice, that a big sideboard pickup. Temporal Mastery in hand is not the place that you want it early on. It's not going to be something that's going to be easy for him to cast anytime soon. Ancestral Vision, tempting.
Marcus is really good with the Magician's tricks here, trying to influence Niklas' decision.
Just wants to make sure he can read all the text on it. There's plenty of it. Doesn't want him to think that maybe it doesn't get exiled when you cast it or something.
Willcleave Leech, also a popular Thoughtseize target.
Andre Müller once Willcleave Leech Thoughtseized me.
Interesting choice actually here, I think, between Ancestral Vision and Thing in the Eyes, because after sideboard, this Thing in the Eyes might actually be a really scary card.
Super scary, yeah, because if you say that you're casting extra turns cards, whichever they may be, it doesn't take very many turns for a transformed Thing in the Ice to kill someone, and also, of course, in the process, it means that there are no blockers.
Although Niklas is holding a Liliana, so that maybe would have swayed me to take the Ancestral Vision instead. Completely depends on his hand, of course, and how he sideboarded.
Yeah, the Jun Death Shadow deck is an intricate one to play. It's a popular deck and very potent in the right hands, but Death Shadow has fundamentally changed a lot of the rules of how you play a straightforward beatdown deck. For a kickoff, I would say that this deck is no longer straightforward.
No, but I think the complexity of playing Death Shadow has been overstated a little bit, and only now people are starting to pick the deck up, now that it's a clear tier 1 deck, maybe the best deck in the format. So yeah, it's difficult to play perfectly, but it's not too hard to play it well, which I think is true for a lot of decks in Modern.
Mishra's Bauble checking out what's on top of Evald's deck there. In upkeep, he'll get to draw an additional card, and of course, one extra card type in the graveyard, meaning that the likes of Traverse the Ilvenvald will be that much more effective. There is that Traverse. Delirium has been achieved, so he's going to be able to search up a creature in addition to other lands. Goes for the Street Wraith there. Now, what does that signal?
He already has a Death Shadow in hand. He just wants to get his life total as low as humanly possible. So now he has a 2/2 Death Shadow, which is virtually a 3/3 Death Shadow, which is virtually a 5/5.
I mean, that is where he wants to be. He wants to be forcing Marcus Evald, if he's got the likes of Exhaustion or so on, to have to use it early rather than later.
Yes, and in my experience playing Death Shadow, the matchups where you don't mind your own life total dropping extremely low against control, combo, well, combo depends, of course, and decks like Infact, then the Death Shadow deck is very straightforward to play. You deal yourself as much damage as possible. You get the biggest Death Shadow or multiple Death Shadows that you can build, and well, that's just clean magic. You double strike it for 14, killing 2 hits, something like that.
Inquisition of Kozilek reveals a hand that's not too exciting, takes Exhaustion, and Marcus Evald, he's got to be a bit worried about this game too. It might be slipping away from him here.
Much weaker draw from his side. He has this Vision Suspended, which basically doesn't do anything. He so far hasn't been able to miracle Temporal Master. Well, now would actually be the first turn where he can do it. And Nicholas is putting on a lot more pressure here.
Yeah, it's going to be a rough one for him to get out of. You can also see there's an Abrupt Decay in hand for Nicholas Holtman here. So he is going to have the opportunity to deny Evald his first copy of As Foretold. There aren't too many permanents that he can hit, but obviously being able to hit that one, very important indeed. Marcus may be heading to his sideboard soon enough. Let's see what he can put together here. Finds a Serum Visions. Serum Visions Scry there potentially lets him set up a Temporal Mastery next turn.
True. I mean, that's kind of what he needs, because also the fact that his vision would come down faster. Exhaustion is not bad either.
I mean, as mentioned in game 1, this is all about survival these first 3 turns or so. He really needs to get up to the point that he can cast his big spells, and then we might be into something here. Liliana of the Veil comes down. Maelstrom Pulse in hand in addition to Abrupt Decay.
Yeah, Maelstrom Pulse, not the most interesting card, but there's always this danger that an offbeat deck, like the one you're facing, might bring in 4 white ley lines, and suddenly you're just completely cold with all your discard spells. So I like this inclusion.
White ley line, definitely an interesting option that might be available to Marcus Evald.
Time for the miracle. Yes. Alexander Hayne would be so proud.
He would. Maybe he's watching. So from here, it's still work for Marcus to be doing, but that was stage 1, which was surviving to the point that he could get up to 5 mana.
Oh, and because he had that Ancestor Vision suspended, this Temporal Mastery was more than just an Explorer, which, well, basically lets you untap your lands. Nothing else though. That's not a lot. There has to be a cryptic command here, right?
I would imagine so. Nicholas just ticks up Liliana. Lingering Souls in the graveyard for him. No white mana just yet.
Don't know why we're seeing Lingering Souls in this matchup. That seems like far too slow to matter.
Well, he has got Marcus Evald in check. Facing down lethal next turn, there's going to have to be some action from this red-blue deck.
But we know Marcus has a full hand, full grip, so we will start. Oh, no use of the mana for the turn. Whoa, these swings. I can't take them.
It is probably the swingiest element, and if you're looking for a swingy card, Gemstone Caverns there, the land. Cryptic Command to deal with Death Shadow for now. Of course, he is going to get to untap and have another turn here. At 6 mana now, so all of his additional turns cards are going to be live. He has Time Warp in addition to Temporal Mastery going on.
Tobias Henke from the coverage team can't believe it. Glued to this, not to the screen, to the battlefield.
He's glued to our screens. But a bit of a thinker here for Marcus Evald in terms of what he wants to do on the scry after drawing his card from Serum Visions. One on top. Could it be another Temporal Mastery? Surely not. So he passes, and there's the attempt at Kolaghan's command.
Which wouldn't have been too strong, but I think Marcus is concerned that he might never find a target for that spell pierce again. Down to 2 cards also. I think he's gotten a bit flooded, and that Liliana is actually doing work.
Takes out Scalding Tarn. Death Shadow's back. Just casting the Temporal Mastery.
Yeah, and this was like the most expensive cantrip in the world.
And there was a slightly cheaper version of that same cantrip. Yeah, running out of total cards here has been a problem. You can see a kind of a wry smile from Evald as he tries to find a way of getting things going here. There is a copy of Mikakoro Sent to the Sea in his deck, but he didn't manage to find it. Does find Chandra, goes to the top, doesn't see what he needs. It is 1-1 between Marcus Evald and Nicholas Holtman here in our feature match area here at Grand Prix Copenhagen.
But this wasn't Nicholas's doing, this was just the Fateful Toad deck not performing.
And I guess this is one of the things that we're going to have to get a feel for, potentially by looking out at Marcus's results over the course of this tournament and maybe a bit of testing online. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that want to get a feel for that one. Get in a lot of matches and get a feel for how consistent or not that deck may be.
Let me take a picture of the deck list.
In the meantime, Juha Matti van Hatupa with Affinity is up against Martin Dang on more Jund Death Shadow. Martin Dang of Team Genesis, one of the players that I believe has been playing various variations on Death Shadow for a while. And a game up already against Affinity here. Both of these decks can be fairly aggressive. What are the key cards we should be looking out for in this matchup?
The Death Shadow deck has the bigger explosive potential, but only if it gets on board. And usually the Affinity deck is the one that puts the most pressure on Death Shadow because of exactly the cards we see. Steel Overseer has to be killed. Edge Champion cannot be killed, and then there's also Master of Ethereum. So Martin Dang needs to control these cards if he wants to have a shot. I think he's already falling too far behind in this game. In San Antonio, I actually played Jund Death Shadow with the white sideboard, primarily to win the mirror with Lingering Souls. But I also played Stony Silence.
Interesting.
So with all the cantrips that you're playing anyway, and you don't really want to board out, that was actually my main weapon to beat Affinity draws like the one you see. Then you only have to deal with Edge Champion, which you can raise. Dealing with this board is almost impossible. I think Juha Matti might have failed to activate his
Steel Overseer?
Yeah, because on turn, well, not on the turn he had 3 mana. He surely cast the Edge Champion, so the Steel Overseer didn't have Summoning Sickness anymore. Also, we saw some hand waving there, indicating that it was forgotten.
It may well be that, in spite of all that, Juha-Matti. Wow, huge play from Martin Dang there. Kozilek's return. It's not too often that the fact that it has devoid is relevant, but right now is definitely one of those times. In response to the Steel Overseer, this is going to really make Juha-Matti look back on whether or not if he did miss that activation. This is huge because 2 damage to all creatures in play, and that damage is colorless damage, meaning that protection that is afforded by Metalcraft on Etched Champion does not apply here, and everything goes in the bin for the Affinity player. Suddenly Martin Dang is right back in this.
That's just a ridiculous blowout, and Yuya, of course, being punished for missing the activation, but on the other hand, the return would have blown him out anyway.
Now, as much as I'm enjoying this match, and I'm definitely glad that we got to catch that play, I really want to see some more of this As Foretold deck in action. So we're going to jump back and see this Game 3 between Marcus Evald and Niklas Holtmann. Turn 1 has gone as well as it could have gone for Marcus here, I believe. He's got his Ancestral Vision suspended. The big question here is how much can Holtmann get going early doors. He's already used a fetch land to find his land, so he's already dropping his life total nicely. Step 1, Inquisition of Kozilek. Are there any targets? Just a Spell Pierce. 2 different ways of taking extra turns in hand. Marcus is going to have to weather the storm here in order to get to the point where he can cast them, though.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to see Temporal Mastery in your hand, of course.
Yeah, it almost becomes the sort of the white whale that's just always there. You know that you're struggling when you have it in your opening hand. Obviously, there are turns in the game where you definitely want it, but ideally you just want it on top of your deck.
I think Niklas should be on 17.
I believe so, yeah.
We see the fetch land and the dual land.
There we go. And Niklas himself would be very, very keen to point out he's on lower life total, because that's kind of what this deck does. Making sure that Death Shadow comes out early and often.
Yeah, now you go to 4. Well, no, interesting. And surprising. I was sure we would see Niklas go to 14, maybe even have the nice draw of Thoughtseize, go down to 12, play a Death Shadow.
How many Blood Crypt does Death Shadow typically run?
Usually, actually, Blood Crypt is the card you play 2 of. It depends a little bit on the version. There are these Death Shadow decks which now also splash blue and or white, but black-red is just super important. Well, you want all of your lands to produce black, to be fair.
So Holtmann sees that Mikakoro Center of the Sea was the draw there for Evald. No other additional changes to the hand, so I would guess that Time Warp is the straightforward choice here. Goes for the Temple Mastery.
Which is just strictly worse unless you have a way to put it on top of your deck.
I suppose so, yes. I'm not quite sure what that method would be.
Brainstorm.
Well, here comes Death Shadow.
Okay, it's being searched out with Traverse. Yes. So Niklas has the chance to drop himself below 13 next turn, and then maybe 1, maybe even 2 Death Shadows get going.
I mean, if he fetched a Blood Crypt, he could be at 12 right now.
Like I said, that's why I'm a bit confused. Maybe there is the fear of Blood Moon.
That's interesting. Blood Moon is definitely a card that it's reasonable to want to respect. I don't know whether or not it's actually in something that we've got in store in this game, but it's certainly an interesting thing to consider.
Yeah, but the thing is, if this playing around the card you don't even know your opponent has means your clock gets shortened by 1 or 2 turns, that's like super risky play, actually. Or there was a completely other reason to fetch the swamp. We don't really know.
As things stand, one thing we do know is that he has Death Shadow in hand, he has the mana to cast it, and that happens right now alongside a Tarmogoyf. So threats deployed.
Yes, but almost impossible to kill next turn. Even though there are some draws, you rarely bring an opponent from 20 to 0 with your first attack. You know, there are ways later on in the game when you've brought yourself further down, let's say to 3, of course, but here I don't think so.
Yeah, it would take a strange combination of Street Wraiths and Teemo Battle Rages, I think, in order to close the game out next turn.
Well, it's close, right? If you have a fetch land, shock yourself, you're on 6, the Death Shadow is 7, your double strike is 14, and then it really depends on how big the Tomogorth is. It's just, in general, you're just a little bit short.
But looking at the look on Marcus' face there, I would guess that he doesn't have a whole lot going on here. We've seen his hand at various stages. He has been using Mikakuro, but there are a lot of lands still in hand for him here.
I think he also drew another Temple Mastery, maybe even off the Mikakuro activation.
Which, if you're doing it at end of turn and have mana to use it, is great. Unfortunately.
But even an exhaustion could be good enough here. Denying your opponent 3 mana, I think, could be completely reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, exhaustion is one of those cards that, in a deck like this, often is very close to being a Time Walk. And I've actually seen some lists of this that toy around with Giga Draws for similar sorts of reasons, that sometimes just dealing with your opponent's lands is enough to put you in good shape.
Giga Draws actually gives you the option also. So sometimes it's enough to cast it for 1 or 2 mana, because on this board it would already prevent all of the damage.
Yes.
Interesting. Maybe we have to add that.
We can get brewing.
We'll make it closer to blue-red Time Walk.
Rashad, our producer, is convinced that Snapcaster Mage is still a key piece of the puzzle. Maybe in fact, we're just taking out the As Foretold at this point. I kind of like when As Foretold was in play, it looked very, very powerful. So I think this one warrants a little bit of a trip to the brewery.
Too early to tell. Niklas is now trying to piece together the puzzle of whether he can attack for lethal, and I think if he can, he should.
Now we see the reason for that early Thoughtseize on Temporal Mastery rather than Time Warp. It means that he's able to use Surgical Extraction to remove all of them from the deck, because while it's a less potent card in hand, it's a very potent card indeed on the top of Marcus's deck, and revealing a Teemo Battle Rage as well here. That enough for the handshake. Marcus Evald, he put up the brave fight. Game 1 was just a rhapsody in blue, but since that it has been downhill all the way for Marcus Evald in this matchup against Niklas Holtmann. Niklas Holtmann advancing to 4-0 here at Grand Prix Copenhagen with Jund Death Shadow, a deck that I'm sure we're going to be seeing plenty more of this tournament. We will have more Magic for you soon enough, but first, sit tight, we'll be back soon. We have these messages.